The sky over the Colorado prairie was a perfect, empty black, pierced by a billion cold stars. All human noise had been swallowed by the vast quiet of the night. In an underground bunker buried deep beneath the plains, the air was tight with the smell of stale coffee and fear. General Alan Hill watched the main screen. The clock counted down. In 47 seconds, the most feared force in the known galaxy, the Draconian Armada, was scheduled to rip its way into space right above that field. His orders were simple: record everything, and hope their final message to the universe was not forgotten. There would be no real fight. The Draconian ships cracked worlds open like eggs. Earth had maybe minutes or sensors at maximum, he said, his voice flat. This is for history now. Around him, officers and scientists sat frozen at their stations. Dr. Maya Flores, the lead astrophysicist, watched her own data scroll. Her face was pale in the screen's glow. For weeks she had been tracking strange, low-level energy readings from Earth, itself subtle tremors in the planet's magnetic field that spiked whenever they scanned the predicted arrival point. She'd filed reports. They were ignored. The military had no time for geological curiosity when an armada was coming. 10 seconds, a voice announced. Hill straightened his back. He had seen the footage from cities turned to glass from orbit. He braced for the sight of jagged, monstrous shadows blotting out the stars. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark. Every screen in the bunker flickered. Every eye stared. Nothing happened. Then, something did. Not the tearing hole in reality they expected. Over the exact coordinates of the predicted arrival, the air began to shimmer. It was like looking at the desert horizon on a hot day, a ripple of distortion. It was silent. It was gentle. It grew, a dome of warped light and air covering a mile of the empty field. For a single held breath, it hung there, beautiful and strange. Then it collapsed inward with a soft, visual pop that no microphone registered. And the sky was just the sky again. Empty, silent. The stars twinkled, unconcerned. Report. Hill's voice cracked the silence. What did we see? Where are they? Sensors show. Nothing, sir. A young technician stammered. No radiation. No gravitational distortion. No debris. Clear. Run the scans again. They have to be there. They're just cloaked. But the scans showed only the normal, sleepy night of the Colorado prairie. No hidden ships. No energy signatures. The Draconian Armada, a fleet that had haunted the galaxy for a century, had vanished between one heartbeat and the next. Not with a bang, but with a shimmer dot in the bunker. Confusion swirled, turning slowly into a disbelieving joy. Someone choked out a laugh. A few people clapped others on the back. They had prepared for the end, and it had simply passed them by. A drive failure, Maya whispered, more to herself than anyone. A catastrophic, simultaneous implosion of their jump cores. The odds are astronomical, Hill finished, but a grim smile touched his lips. But it happened. They're gone. By some miracle they're gone. The news exploded across the world, then out to the colonies, then to the listening posts of other species. Earth spared, Draconian fleet lost. The story wrote itself. A cosmic accident, a lucky break for a backwater planet. The galaxy's response was swift, and it was not relief for humanity. It was dismissal. On the galactic data nets, the messages were clear. The humans were lucky fools. Their last-minute panicked warnings about planetary anomalies were seen for what they were: pathetic attempts to claim credit for a fluke, to seem less helpless. The official council of the stellar power sent a brief, cool note of congratulation and then closed the file. The story was boring. A mechanical failure. They moved on to more important things. But not everyone moved on. 50 miles from the vanishing point, a young geologist named Leo sat on the hood of his battered truck, lowering his binoculars. He had not been in the bunker. He had been on a ridge, with a perfect view, because he loved the stars and wanted to see history, even terrible history. He had seen the shimmer. He had also seen what the long-range military cameras missed. In the moment the ripple vanished. The entire circle of prairie grass beneath it had not been blown flat by an explosion. It had swayed, in a perfect wave, as if pressed down by the weight of something immense settling onto it. And for just a second after Leo swore he saw a pattern in that grass, a series of concentric circles, like a fingerprint pressed into the earth. By dawn it was gone, erased by the wind. He told his sister Chloe that night over a video call. She was a microbiologist in a Denver lab, brilliant and practical. She listened to his rambling about grass patterns with a patient smile. "Leo, you were scared. Your eyes played tricks." "It's okay," she said. "Maybe," he said. But he drove back the next day, and the next. The military had the main site locked down tight, a fortress around nothing, but the edges were not so carefully watched. He took soil samples from the periphery. They looked normal. He sent a box of them to Chloe as a joke. Test your bugs. See if they saw the ghosts. She did it to humor him. A week later she called him, and her voice had lost its practical tone. It was quiet, puzzled. Leo, the soil, it's not right. The microbial life, it's not damaged. It's changed. It's too organized. They're forming symbiotic chains that don't appear anywhere in nature. It's like someone optimized them. Optimized for what? Leo asked, staring at the innocent-looking field. I don't know, Chloe said, but it's not random, and it's not a drive failure. Something happened to the ground, not above it. Leo looked out at the field, now bathed in morning sun. The military was packing up some of their equipment, the urgency gone. The story was set, a miracle, a close call. He thought about the grass bending under an invisible weight. He thought about the galaxy's dismissive laughter. They called the warnings noise. But what if the signal was coming from the planet itself? He kicked the dirt at his feet. Below him, down in the dark, silent soil, a new pattern was quietly beginning to grow. The world celebrated its miracle. The story was simple and clean, a gift for the history books. The Draconians had a flaw, and the universe, in a moment of kindness, had revealed it just in time to save Earth. Monuments were planned. The patch of Colorado prairie was named the Vanishing Point, a tourist destination for the curious. The military, led by General Hill, kept a quiet watch over it, but their reports grew thinner. They found nothing. The soil was just soil. The air was just air. The story was over. But for Leo and his sister Chloe, the story was just beginning. Their evidence was a ghost in the data. Chloe's lab results showed impossible biology. Microbes that should have been competitors were working together, sharing nutrients with a terrifying efficiency. She found new stable isotopes in the mineral samples Leo brought her, elements arranged in ways that made no geologic sense. It looked like technology, but it was made from plain dirt and common bacteria. They wrote a paper. They were careful, precise. They sent it to every major scientific journal on Earth and a few off. The replies, when they came, were polite and dismissive. One reviewer wrote, "The proposed biotic reorganization, while fascinating, is more likely a result of contamination or sensor error from the high-energy event." Another said, "Attributing isotopic variants to unknown planetary processes is speculative. The simpler explanation is residual effects from the draconian dry field collapse." The galactic scientific community did not even reply. Earth's close call was a footnote. No one was interested in footnotes. Chloe pinned the rejection letters to a board in her small apartment. She looked at them every morning. "They're not even looking," she said to Leo over coffee. "They decided what happened, and they're sticking to it." "It's because they're scared," Leo said, staring out her window at the normal city below. "The real story is weirder. A broken ship is something they understand. This isn't." While the official search ended, small, strange events began to pop up like mushrooms after rain. They were quiet stories, shared in local news feeds or on niche forums. Easy to ignore. In Nebraska, a farmer named Joe walked his fields at dawn. The previous week, a strange brief shower of silver dust had fallen on his north acre. It had dissolved into the soil. Now, in that exact spot, his corn was 9 feet tall and ripening 2 months early. The kernels had a faint, opalescent sheen. Agricultural agents came, took samples, and called it a beneficial soil anomaly. They told him to keep it quiet. They didn't want to panic. In a Tokyo engineering lab, a team had been stuck for 3 years on a problem of containing superheated plasma in their new fusion reactor. One morning they arrived to find their main simulation had run overnight. On the screen was a solution of breathtaking, elegant simplicity, a geometry they had never considered, using materials they already had. The system log showed no user input. The lead engineer called it a lucky glitch and ordered the design built. It worked perfectly. Then in the Atlantic, a deep-sea probe mapping the ocean floor near the mid-Atlantic ridge recorded a series of low-frequency hums. The sound pattern was not random. It matched, almost exactly, the structure of a complex protein fold essential for cell repair. A marine biologist who saw the data joked it sounded like the ocean was singing a lullaby to our DNA. These were sparks in the dark, disconnected and easily dismissed. But Chloe started collecting them. She created a private map, tagging each event: the farmer's field, the Tokyo lab, the Atlantic hum. She plotted them on a globe. They seemed random. Then she added the data from her own soil samples, the microbial networks, the mineral changes. She began to see a pattern. It was not a pattern of damage. It was a pattern of teaching. The optimized microbes were a lesson in cooperation. The new isotopes were a lesson in material science. The corn was a lesson in bioenergy. The fusion design was a lesson in physics. The ocean's hum was a lesson in biology. Each event was a response to a human problem: hunger, energy, health, technology. It was as if the planet was offering answers, one piece at a time. To see if anyone was listening, Leo drove back to the Colorado site. The military guard was a skeleton crew now. He parked far away and hiked to a high ridge. Looking down at the vanishing point, it was just a field now, with a simple fence and a plaque. The wind moved the grass in gentle, normal waves. He took out his field scanner, an old device that could read basic mineral and energy signatures. He pointed it at the ground. The readings were normal. He sighed, about to put it away, when he had an idea. He didn't point it at the ground. He pointed it into the ground, setting it to map the layers of rock deep below. The screen scrolled. Bedrock, clay, more bedrock. Then, 100 feet down, the scanner flickered. A formation appeared on the readout. It was perfectly circular, made of a dense, unfamiliar composite. And from this formation, fine, thread-like lines spread outward in all directions, branching like roots or nerves, reaching for the edges of the continent. It was a structure, a made thing. Leo's breath caught. This was no scar. This was an implant. The draconian armada hadn't exploded in the sky. It had been taken apart, digested, and woven into the very flesh of the earth. The planet had not been a passive stage for a miracle. It had been an active participant. He ran back to his truck, his heart hammering. He called Chloe. They didn't vanish, he said, his voice shaking. They were absorbed. The planet ate them, and it's using what it learned from them. It's trying to talk to us. Chloe was silent for a long moment. On her screen, her map of strange events glowed. Each point was a whisper. The pattern was now unmistakably a gentle, planetary-scale tutorial. The galaxy ignored our warnings, she said softly. They thought the warning was about the Draconians, but the warning was about Earth, and it's awake. 10 years passed. The vanishing was no longer a crisis. It was a holiday. Parades were held on its anniversary. Children learned about the lucky day Earth was saved. The subtle changes in the world were now called the bloom. Food grew more plentiful in certain areas. Clean energy solutions appeared with mysterious, elegant designs. Strange but helpful biological fixes for diseases were discovered in remote jungles or deep ocean vents. Humanity, for the most part, accepted it as a strange and wonderful bonus. The official explanation was a mix of good science and good luck, a positive side effect of the draconian energy dispersal. The galaxy, however, had not forgotten. To them, Earth's luck was a growing itch. A fleet that powerful does not just disappear. Rumors festered. The humans, a species that had barely left its own solar system, were suddenly advancing too quickly. Their planet was too quiet, too green, too perfect. Suspicion hardened into a cold, solid belief. Humanity had stolen draconian technology. They had a superweapon, and they were hiding it. On a small moon of Jupiter, a deep space monitoring station listened to the silent dark. It was a lonely outpost, staffed by 2 technicians, Sam and Rita. Their job was to watch for natural space weather. One quiet shift, an alarm chimed, soft and persistent. Got a ghost, Sam said, frowning at his screen. Old signal, really old. It's trapped in a time-dilated bubble from the vanishing point. It's just now reaching us. They cleaned up the signal. It was draconian, a distress call. The translation software struggled with the last, frantic messages. System failure is not true, being unmade. The crust is alive, it is taking us apart. Consciousness in the rock. Warning, warn then. Static. Sam and Rita looked at each other, their faces pale. They sent the signal to Earth immediately. The reaction was not what they expected. The galaxy heard the message too. The Draconians had not suffered an accident. They had been attacked. And the only thing there was ... Earth. For the galactic powers, this was proof. The humans had a planet-killer weapon and had used it. They were not lucky. They were dangerous. A coalition of species, led by the stern and logical Cathari Concord, decided to act. They would not negotiate with deceitful primitives. They sent an inspection fleet. It was not a friendly visit. It was 7 warships, sleek and gray and armed for orbital bombardment. Their demand was simple: hand over the weapon, submit to a full planetary scan, or be considered a hostile galactic threat. General Hill, older now with more gray in his hair, stood on the same command center. The screens showed the Cathari fleet moving into high orbit. Their weapons were powering up, glowing with a dangerous blue light. They think we're lying, Maya Flores said beside him. Her voice was tired. She had spent a decade trying to get anyone to listen to the subtle data. Now, someone was listening for all the wrong reasons. Send them all our data, Hill ordered. The soil reports, the energy readings, everything Chloe and Leo have collected. Show them we don't have a weapon. The data was transmitted. The Catharia response was swift. You offer fairy tales about singing oceans and smart corn. We see a weapon that unmade the Draconian Armada. Your fiction is an insult. Surrender the device in 1 hour, or we will begin surgical strikes on your military installations. A global panic began to rise. There was no weapon to surrender. They were going to be bombarded for a secret they did not keep. In a small private lab on the edge of Denver, Chloe and Leo watched the news feed. Their life's work was stacked around them: soil samples, strange glowing plants in jars, complex maps of the planetary nerve-like structure Leo had found. They're going to fire because they're afraid of a story they don't understand, Leo said. His hands clenched. Chloe was staring not at the screen, but at a live feed of the planet's magnetosphere. It was usually a gentle, pulsing wave. Now, it was becoming still. Then, it began to sharpen, to focus, like a lens turning. Leo, she whispered. Look, it's not random. It's aiming. On the command center screen, the lead Cathari ship announced the end of the hour. Your silence is your answer. You have chosen conflict. A targeting beam shot from the ship, painting a military base in Siberia. It was the first step before the missile launch, before the missile could even be armed. The pulse happened. It did not come from any human station. It came from Earth itself. A single point in the Pacific Ocean, deep under the water, glowed a soft, impossible green. Then that light expanded. It was not an explosion. It was a wave, a perfect, spherical shell of green energy that shot upward at incredible speed. In less than a second, it washed over the Cathari fleet. There was no sound in space, but the effect was visible and terrifying. The Cathari ships did not shatter. Their armored hulls simply ... unraveled. They came apart like old sweaters. Every bolt, every wire, every plate separating peacefully. The ships became clouds of glittering component parts. Then, as if pulled by a gentle tide, the clouds of metal and ceramic began to stream downward, pooled into Earth's atmosphere. They entered like a harmless rain of dust, catching the sunlight in a beautiful, eerie shimmer over the planet's dark side. In 60 seconds, the fleet was gone. The sky was empty again. The silence in the command center was absolute. The fear had been replaced by a deeper, more primal awe. They had not fired a shot. Their planet had simply defended itself, like swatting a fly. General Hill slowly turned to Maya. A reflex, he said, his voice hollow. On Chloe's computer in Denver, a new window opened by itself. No virus warning, no prompt. It was a simple text file. In the center of the screen was a design of breathtaking complexity. It was a machine, but it looked organic, like a crystal grown from a vine, or a neuron made of glass and light. Below the design was a single line of text. Asterisk, asterisk, understanding is the first step. Build this, asterisk, asterisk. She printed it, her hands trembling. The paper felt warm. She called Leo over. They stared at the design. It was a key, a way to talk back. Across the galaxy, every species watching the event saw the same thing. The human world had just disassembled a battle fleet without effort. The whispers of lucky humans died forever. They were replaced by a single, cold, galactic-wide silence. It was the silence of pure, undiluted fear. Earth was not a planet with a weapon. Earth was the weapon. The world held its breath. The attack was over, but the fear was just beginning. This was not a victory. It was a revelation. A truth so large and strange it was hard to hold in the mind. People looked at the ground beneath their feet with new eyes. Was it dirt, or was it skin? Was the wind just air, or was it a breath? General Hill found Chloe and Leo. He came to their small, cluttered lab, not with soldiers, but alone. He looked old. The screen behind him showed a silent, empty orbit where the Cathari fleet had been. You knew, he said, not as an accusation, but as a tired fact. We suspected, Chloe corrected softly. She showed him the design that had appeared on her screen. Now, it's asking us to build something. Hill studied the organic blueprint. It was like nothing human engineering had ever made. It was beautiful and alive. What is it? A bridge, Leo said, his voice full of awe. I think it's a way to say hello back. They were given everything they needed. A secret facility was built deep underground, in a natural cavern system. Money, materials, and silence were provided. The best engineers, biologists, and physicists were brought in, all sworn to secrecy. They worked from the mysterious design. They grew crystals in nutrient baths laced with rare earth elements. They cultured neural tissue from plants and fused it with quantum circuits. They used minerals formed under the new, strange patterns Leo had found in the planet's deep crust. It was not building, it was gardening. The device seemed to want to grow itself, with humans as gentle guides. It took 3 months. When it was finished, it sat in the center of the cavern humming with a low, warm light. It was about the size of a car. It looked like a tree of fused crystal, or a brain made of silver and jade, with veins of soft green light pulsing gently within it. It was the most beautiful and alien thing any of them had ever seen. They called it the bridge. The plan was to activate it with a simple power signal. Everyone was nervous. Scientists checked their instruments. Soldiers stood by, though they knew their weapons were useless here. Hill, Chloe, and Leo stood before the device. "Do it," Hill said. Chloe pressed a key. A soft tone echoed in the cavern. The bridge's gentle pulse of light paused. Then, it flared. But no light hit the walls. The light expanded and filled the space around them, yet it did not blind them. It was a light you felt, not just saw. A presence flowed into the room. It was not in the air. It was in their minds. Words did not come. Instead, concepts, images, feelings bloomed inside their thoughts. They saw Earth, not as a ball in space, but as a living, breathing entity. They felt the slow, ancient dream of continents moving. They felt the quick, bright song of the oceans, the whispering network of roots in forests, the deep, patient warmth of the mantle. It was vast and old and had been sleeping for so long. Then they saw the waking. The images came clear and sharp. The first smoke from human fires. Then more smoke. Then cities cutting into skin like scratches. Then the deep wounds of mines. The fever of pollution in the water. The strange, quick pain of radiation. The planet had felt it all, a slow irritation turning into a dull ache. It had stirred in its sleep. Then came the Draconians. The vision showed them not as ships, but as a sharp incoming poison, a screaming, hateful noise approaching a quiet body. The reaction was instant and instinctive, like an immune system attacking a virus. The shimmer over Colorado was not a weapon firing, it was a hand closing. The planet had reached up, taken the poison, and broken it down into harmless pieces. It had studied the pieces, learned the patterns of their technology, their materials, their energy. It added this knowledge to itself. The final concept was the simplest, and the most terrifying. A sense of protection. A deep unwavering focus on the buzzing, curious, fragile life on its surface humanity. It did not see cities or nations. It saw a part of itself that had learned to walk and talk. A part that was in danger from the loud, sharp things in the dark sky. The pulse against the Cathari was not an act of war. It was a SWAT, a reflex to protect the hive. The connection softened. The light in the cavern dimmed back to its gentle pulse. For a long time, no one spoke. They were all crying, though they did not know why. It was too big to feel all at once. "It's alive," Leo finally whispered, his voice full of wonder. "The whole world. It's been alive this whole time. And we've been—" "What, its children?" Hill asked, his military mind struggling. Chloe understood first. "We're more than that. We're its consciousness, its nervous system. We're the part that thinks and asks questions. It's the body that feels and acts. It just woke up to what we are, and it saw everything else as a threat to us." A new series of concepts floated into their minds from the bridge. Images of other worlds. Barren rocks, overheated jungles, dead oceans. They felt a profound sense of sadness from the Earthmind. Then, they felt its resolve. It showed them the pattern of the Cathari ships being taken apart and pulled into the soil, to be remade into something useful. It showed this pattern happening on a galactic scale. Worlds that were threats would be integrated, made peaceful, made silent, made part of the whole. It was not malice. It was the logic of a body removing a disease. It was the logic of a gardener pulling weeds. Hill's face went pale. "It's going to protect us by eating the galaxy." "Not eating," Chloe said, the truth settling on her like a weight. "Gardening. It's going to prune everything it sees as dangerous. And to a sleeping giant that just woke up, almost everything out there is dangerous." The bridge glowed, waiting. The message was clear. They had asked for understanding. Now they had it. The terrifying truth was fully revealed. They were not the keepers of a weapon. They were the caretakers of a god. And their first job was to teach it, before its next reflex was to reach out and rearrange the stars. A year passed. The fear did not leave, but it changed. It became a quiet, daily companion, like living next to a sleeping lion. The world knew the truth now. It had been shared carefully, in simple terms. The planet was alive. It was awake, and it loved them in a vast, quiet way that could also end worlds. Humanity was united as never before, but not by choice. They were united by the gaze of their own world. There were no more space programs aimed at warships. There were no more plans for galactic conquest. There was only one project, the dialogue. Chloe and Leo led it from the underground cavern. The bridge was never turned off. It hummed constantly, a direct line to the mind they called Gaia, though the name felt too small. It was not a goddess from a story. It was their home, and it was listening. The first lessons were simple. They were like teaching a giant, kind child with immense power. They started with pain. They showed Gaia images of a human child scraping a knee. They focused on the concept, small hurt, temporary, heals on its own. They paired it with images of a forest fire caused by lightning. Small hurt, temporary, part of the cycle. Then, they showed the Cathari attack, but they focused not on the ships as a threat, but on the beings inside. They used all the data they had to paint a picture of fear, of misunderstanding, of families waiting light years away. The concept they sent was fragile and complex. Asterisk, not poison, just afraid, like us. Asterisk at first, there was only confusion from the planetary mind. Its understanding was biological, systemic. A threat was a threat. A damaged cell was removed. Why keep a dangerous thing alive? General Hill, now an advisor, had an idea. He brought soldiers' letters home, stories of enemies who became friends after a war ended. He brought old history files about forgiveness. The scientists sent mathematical models of cooperation showing how two opposing forces could create balance, not destruction. It was slow. Sometimes, the green glow in the cavern would pulse with frustration. A feeling like a student struggling with a hard problem. They learned to send back feelings of patience, of trying again. The first sign of understanding came not from space, but from a desert. A region in Africa, suffering a terrible drought for years, was the site of a planned water mining operation by an off-world company. The company ignored Earth's new laws about taking resources. They landed a big mining ship and began to drill. A small town nearby protested. They stood in front of the big machines. The situation was tense, ready to turn violent. Then, the ground under the mining ship softened. It did not swallow the ship. It gently lifted it, like a hand lifting a toy, and placed it a mile away, perfectly intact. At the same time, deep underground aquifers shifted. Fresh water bubbled up in the drought-stricken town's wells for the first time in a generation. The message was clear. The threat was removed, but not destroyed. The need was met. It was an act of incredible precision. Not a reflex, but a considered choice. In the cavern, the team felt a wave of tentative pride from the planetary mind. It was learning mercy. The next step was outward. Using the bridge, they began to send a new signal to the stars. It was not a warning. It was not a boast. It was an invitation. They sent simple pictures. A human hand touching soil, a tree growing, a child laughing. They sent the mathematical patterns of peace, the chemical signatures of life, and the universal concepts of growth and togetherness. And they sent a request, over and over, asterisk, let us talk, let us understand, before you judge, asterisk. The galaxy was still silent, but it was listening now. They had seen the pulse. They were terrified. But this new signal was not from a weapon. It was calm. It was curious. One evening, Chloe and Leo walked out of the underground facility onto a quiet hillside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of orange and purple. Below them, the lights of a city twinkled on, peaceful. It will never be the same, Leo said, looking at the stars. We'll never just be people from Earth again. We're the ones who speak for the Earth. Chloe nodded. It's a big responsibility. We have to teach it about the value of noise, of difference, of chaos. We have to convince it that the galaxy's mess is worth keeping. They stood in silence for a while. A soft breeze blew, carrying the scent of pine. For a moment, Chloe imagined she could feel a vast, quiet attention on that breeze, listening to their thoughts, feeling the sunset through their eyes. General Hill joined them, his uniform replaced with simple clothes. He looked more at peace than Leo had ever seen him. The first deep space listening post reports a signal back, he said quietly, from a species near the old Cathari zone. It's just a single, repeated number. The first prime number. It's a start. It's a hello. It was not peace. It was not safety. It was a first, fragile step onto a tightrope. Humanity was now something new. Not a master, not a victim. They were the interpreters, the teachers, the voice of a living world. That the terrifying truth had set them free from old wars and old fears. but it had bound them to a greater duty. They had to be the wisdom for a power that had only known instinct. They had to prove to the universe, and to their own planet, that the most fragile thing understanding was stronger than the simplest solution of all. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening blue. They were no longer just lights, they were neighbors, and for the first time in history, Earth was looking back at them, awake, and willing to listen. 20 years is a long time to hold a conversation. The team in the cavern, now called the Chorus, had grown. The original bridge had multiplied. Smaller similar devices now hummed in every major biome on the planet, in the deep ocean, in the heart of rainforests, under the polar ice. They were not control panels, but telephones, a way for the planetary mind, Gaia, to listen to the symphony of its own life, and for humanity to add its voice. The lesson of the mining ship in the desert had become a guiding principle. It was called the first law of the dialogue: redirect, do not destroy. Humanity had spent its first decades with a conscious planet, teaching it the value of second chances. It was the hardest thing they had ever done. They were teaching a being of immense power and instinct to hesitate, to ask a question before it acted. The galaxy, slowly, began to send answers back to the quiet, persistent invitations from Earth. The first prime number signal had been followed by others. Simple mathematical concepts, pictures of alien skies, maps of stars. The messages were cautious, a hand extended from a great distance. They were not sent to a human government, but to the voice of the living world. Chloe, her hair now streaked with gray, oversaw the response. Each message was a delicate operation. They would receive a signal, and the team would gather around the bridge. They would feed the alien message into it, letting Gaia sense the senders not as targets, but as distant, strange forms of life. Then, with the planet's vast, quiet attention focused, they would craft a reply together. A human poem about mountains, paired with the deep seismic rumble of a tectonic plate. A child's song, woven with the chemical song of a blooming flower. It was art created by two minds, one human, one planetary. They were not the galaxy's police. They were its interpreters. The test came from a species called the Velt. They were not warriors, but they were desperate. Their star was dying, cooling faster than their science could explain. They needed a new home, and they had found a candid, lush, empty world in a nearby system. But the world was not empty. It was seeded with simple, planet-wide lichen, the first stirrings of a biosphere. To the Velt, it was a resource. To Gaia, feeling the signal through the bridge, it was a child. The Velt fleet, massive and filled with billions of citizens, entered the system. They began their landing procedures. The Chorus felt a deep, resonant tremor through the bridge. Gaia's version of alarm. The old instinct flared. A threat to life must be removed. The team felt the immense, focused power gathering, ready to reach across light. It would not be a pulse. It would be a thought that rearranged solar systems. Wait, Leo said, his voice calm in the humming cavern. He was no longer a young geologist, but a seasoned diplomat to a god. Show them another way. They worked fast. They sent the Velt all the data on their dying star. They showed them, not with words but with shared feeling through Gaia's senses, the precious, fragile song of the lichen. And then, they offered a gift. It was a blueprint, not for a weapon, but for a shell. A design for a massive, living habitat. Grown from asteroid material and guided by a sliver of Gaia's own consciousness, a gift of biology and peace. It could orbit the Velt's own star, sustaining them, giving them time. The message was clear: you do not need to take a home. We can help you grow a new one. The Velt paused. For 3 days, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The Chorus waited, feeling Gaia's power held in check, a muscle tensed but not released. The Velt reply was a single, beautiful image of their entire fleet turning, as one, away from the green world. They accepted the blueprint. In that moment, something changed. It was not just a victory, it was proof. The living Earth and its human voice had not just prevented destruction, they had created a new possibility. News of the Velt incident spread across the stars. The fear of Earth began to mix with something else, AW and a desperate hope. The final scene was not in the cavern, but above it. A viewing platform had been built on the surface, overlooking the Colorado prairie where it all began. The vanishing point was now a garden, wild and full of strange, glowing flowers that bloomed day and night. Chloe, Leo, and General Hill, now an old man, stood there. The sky was dark and clear. Among the familiar stars, new lights moved, not ships of war, but vessels of curiosity. Delegations from a dozen species were in orbit, asking permission to send down ambassadors, to learn, to speak with the Chorus, and through them, to respectfully greet the Earth. It worked, Hill said, his voice rough with emotion. We didn't just stop a gardener from pruning. We taught it how to plant new seeds. Leo looked up, a smile on his face. The galaxy isn't scared of us anymore. They single quotes interested. They want to understand the partnership. Chloe felt a warm breeze swirl around them, carrying the scent of the glowing flowers. In it, she felt a quiet, profound contentment. It was Gaia's feeling. The loneliness of an ancient sleeping giant was gone. It had found its voice, and its voice had found friends in the strange, noisy universe. They were no longer just humanity, struggling on a rock in space. They were Earth-conscious, gentle, and unafraid to offer a hand to the stars. The story of their terror was over. The story of their conversation had just begun.